Hello everybody, hope you're doing okay. Welcome to a church called St Mary the Less in a place called Chilbolton in Hampshire. Now I come here today for a bit of a day out with my wife who I've left in Stockbridge, and I thought I'd do a bit of a run trying to test out two shoes which on the face of it one struggles to see a bit of the point of. One is the Adidas Adizero Pro here and the other one is the ASICS METARACER. Now say what is the point of them, because the ASICS METARACER is £180 and the Adizero Pro is 160, and they're both in the category of sort of low profile carbon fibre racers. But there's been a lot of talk in the reviews of them that they're quite harsh, not much cushioning compared to say the Next Percent or the Endorphin Pro or the Alphafly. And people think, well, they wouldn't wear them for a marathon, but they might wear them for say a half marathon, which I never really understood, because I think, well, if you haven't got enough cushioning for a marathon, you know, half marathon pace isn't really much different, especially for sort of amateur runners like us, not these guys sort of sub 5 minute miling, you know, the pro athletes. So what I thought to do today is I would test out the shoes. I've identified a 3K circuit here and I'll run in each one twice. I think I'll run the first one around about sort of marathon pace-ish, so sort of 6:45 pace to 7 minute mile pace, and then on the second time I'll take them out a bit quicker, see if there's any difference, and then for a test to see how they compare, I'll take out the Next Percent on the last lap and see if I feel like I'm more happier than in these two shoes. Right, so I better get a little warm-up done and we'll see how we go later. Hello, so here's a view of the course I did. So the green dot is where I started, opposite the church, and this is the way I did on the marathon efforts, the first two ones. So I went up here. It feels like it's flat, but I see the elevation suggests it's slightly uphill. So I get to this B road here, and then it continues to rise up very gradually. And as you turn the bend, it actually goes up quite significantly. I certainly feel like you're going uphill then. And then I turned right and then came back down this road here past Gravehill Farm, which basically then is a sort of float back downhill towards the end. And I just finished to complete the loop there. So the overall elevation is no more than sort of 1% either way. So it kind of felt reasonably flat. Okay, so I've done my warm-up, so what I'm going to do now is do a toss of the coin between the Adidas and the ASICS to see which one I actually going to use first. So I'm going to be heads for the Adidas and tails for the METARACER. Right, here's all the shoes. I actually warmed up in the Endorphin Speeds, nice and squidgy, which will be, I'll be getting those in the next shoes. So here's a £2 coin from the UK. There's the head, so we'll just do a random toss, and what do we get? Tail. Okay, so we've got a tail, so that means we go off in the METARACERs first. Right, let's get this going then. Okay, run done in the METARACERs. About 6:48 pace for just between 3K and 2 miles, so it was about 1.94 miles, so about 100 meters more than a 3K, something like that. Wasn't too bad. You kind of feel quite slappy in the METARACERs, definitely don't feel like sort of the cushioning. That was pretty much my marathon pace. It felt like I didn't have to try too much to make that pace, but it's obviously not even just 2 miles, so it shouldn't be too bad. It's pretty flat course, a little bit of a rise middle way, and then I had a bit of a sort of gently sloping last kilometre back to make up for it, but well within myself, that one. So I'm going to try the same effort now in the Adizero Pros. Here we go on the feet there. Okay, the Adizero Pro's done. I must say that didn't feel a particularly comfortable ride. I managed to run exactly the same time, I think, more or less. I think actually I was just a few seconds quicker, just doing race activity to measure the effort. But I must say, so far, I think I prefer the METARACER. One thing you notice when you put the Adidas on is that just that extra weight for me, they're about sort of 30 grams more, and just slightly feel a bit more clumpy as well. It's sort of a relative term, but even on a flat course, I did sort of notice that extra weight straight away. And they do feel sort of so low to the ground, those ones. I mean, I think if you say which is the most cushioned, well, you kind of say, well, neither of them really. But initially when you put them on, it's because the insole's very squidgy, you feel they're quite soft. But when you get going, the insole is almost there to protect almost a rock hard underneath, I think. So I'd say so far I prefer the METARACER, but what I'm going to do now is the same circuit in reverse, but try and go a bit harder and see more like sort of half marathon effort. That was sort of 6:48 pace, something like that, which is just under sub 3. See if I can take it down to about 6:30, see if it feels any different at that sort of effort. Right, let's get going in the METARACER then. So running the Metaracers done. I mean, I think I have to say instantly I put those on, you could feel a little lighter weight in them, but as you get into the run, you feel like sort of slap in them like a traditional old racer. So I'm kind of missing the squidgy feeling of the Next Percent and the Endorphin Pro, those type of shoes. But I was about a minute quicker there, about 6:20ish pace for a sort of a 3k-ish effort. So that was noticeably hard. I felt like I was putting in some effort there. And the other way around made the scenery a bit different. You didn't realise that the drag I thought was quite sort of shallow uphill. It was actually sort of, it was actually steeper coming down it. It was interesting. So I put the Adidas Adizero Pros on now, and I think this is going to be tough to try and match that pace because you know, I felt like I was putting in some effort there, as I said. Anyway, we'll give it a go, then I'll just have time to have one more go on the Next Percent before we leave. Okay, run done in the Adizero Pros. I managed to get the times actually the same. It felt like a lot harder work, but yeah, they felt sort of okay, but sort of just very slappy. I mean, I got round, but I've now put the Next Percents on, and immediately you feel like just sort of sitting still, that you need so much more cushion. So see if that translates into performance. I mean, you kind of say that those are those shoes that I've been wearing so far, you know, kind of, I'm still saying what is the point of them, because we'll judge after this Next Percent run to see if I can get that any easier. I think the heart rate was 1 beat higher average with the Adizeros, which is par for the course considering that was the second run. But I was certainly having to concentrate there, and that was some work. Right, let's get this going in the Next Percent and report back later. Okay, so we're all done in the Next Percent, finally finished the session, and sort of as predicted. It felt like quite hard work though in the Next Percent, but I was actually looking at the data 2 beats lower, and that's on, you know, that's on tired legs. Hello everybody, I'm back inside now. It's a few days later. I've had time to put all the data into my spreadsheet. Apologies, I got cut off rather abruptly at the end of the Next Percent commentary. I literally ran out of battery. Was my final word of speech, so apologies for that. No, just a reminder of what we did. So the main point of this test was to compare the Metaracer against the Adizero Pro to see which one I preferred, but also to set it in context to say the Next Percent, to see whether the Metaracer Adizero Pro as a sort of a lower stack shoe actually stacked up better in inverted commas against these higher stack ones, the ones I kind of prefer. So we did the loop twice in one direction clockwise. I did it at marathon effort, which for me is just under 3-hour pace that I did with the 2:56 in Seville in February. For the next 2 laps, I reversed direction and went at more like my half marathon pace, just under 6:20 pace. And I finished off in the Next Percent at the same effort levels on the same course as the Metaracer and Adizero Pro. So what do we see first of all? Well, I did about a mile warm-up, so I was reasonably sort of fresh for the Metaracer. But as you normally expect with heart rate, then you expect the second run to be slightly higher heart rate than the first one. And that was certainly the case in the first 2 runs, where the Metaracer marathon effort felt reasonably comfortable. Average heart rate there of 128 compared to my maximum of 160. So I was well within myself there. I only got to 133 max on that run. The Adizero Pros, so although I said that the heart rate would go up naturally, it did feel like to me that was slightly harder work. They are slightly heavier shoe, about 30 grams heavier in my size. I've got the UK 12 in the Metaracer and the UK 12.5 in the Adizero Pro, although I go for the UK 13 the Next Percent. So just on feel, I would say I preferred the Metaracer at marathon pace, but there's not a huge amount in it. Both shoes kind of felt quite slappy, and I was sort of trying to work out which one was the more cushioned. And you know, one thing when I put the Adizero Pros on initially, I thought, oh, they feel quite cushioned, but then they've got quite like a spongy insole. When you actually get going, they tend to feel a bit more slappy. The Metaracer, just because they are lighter, it just feels a bit easier. But again, both shoes aren't maximum cushion shoes, so I think by the end of this sort of whole session, my legs were a bit more tired than they would have been had I done the whole thing the Next Percent. So for runs 3 and 4, again, I was trying to get these times exactly the same. So I did one run and then used the race activity feature on the Garmin to basically control my effort. So with that, you can basically see how many seconds you are ahead or behind. And so I never let it get more than about 2 or 3 seconds either way. It's then quite easy to control your pace round. So as you can see, I got those 2 within 2 seconds of each other. So that was good from a sort of pacing point of view. And again, the Adizero Pro, slightly higher heart rate than the Metaracer. If you look on the end here, I actually had 6 minutes rest between most of these ones. That was just time to change the shoes and have a little chat to the GoPro. So again, I felt like the Adizero Pro, I was having to work harder, but then I was already quite tired because the half marathon effort, when you're sort of halfway into the session, did feel noticeably quicker. And as you can see, that was a minute quicker over just short of 2 mile circuit. But the big takeaway here is that when I put the next percent on, even though my legs were then quite tired, I was still able to run the same pace. In fact, if anything, just slightly quicker. But if you notice there that there's not much in it, but the heart rate did actually come down. Certainly came down 2 beats from the Adizero Pro, and was even less than the METARACER when I was considerably fresher. And also telling you the maximum heart rate didn't actually get any higher either. So a quick look at the powers. Again, I also had problems with the air percent difference. This is what the Stride does to try and measure how much the contribution of the wind and air resistance is. And as you can see, although these runs were one after another in basically the same conditions, I mean, if you look at the weather here, it's always 15 miles an hour. So it's quite breezy today. Although I didn't really feel it because it was quite a kind of secluded circuit. You know, there's a lot of tree cover and on sort of narrow country lanes. So it was a nice little circuit to do. But if you see there, the air percent in the next percent was only 1% compared to 5% in the METARACER and 3 and 4 in the Adizero Pro. So you could argue there that the air percent power is almost a function of what shoes you wear. Maybe it's where I put them. Sometimes it's difficult to get them, tie them down properly. So I always try and do the net powers to see if there's any difference there. And again, there's a bit more power in the next percent for some reason. But I think in this sort of effort, I'm always looking more at my times and the relative effort and heart rate to give a bit of judge, because arguably you'd say that all these powers should be the same, running the same time on the same course in the same conditions. Moving on to cadence, as you might expect, my cadence was a bit higher as I was going faster. That's all completely normal for me. Ground contact time, again, slightly lower when I'm running slightly faster. Vertical oscillation, what you might say there is that a slightly higher vertical oscillation, that's how much bounce you're getting in the next percent, which kind of makes sense in a way because that is the biggest stacked shoe. Interestingly, less vertical oscillation in the Adizero Pro, which maybe means that they're the ones that are most slappy, because every time I run in them, it always slap, 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 although the METARACER kind of feels similar. Ground contact time balance, I was a bit over to the left on those runs, maybe not alarmingly so, but all over to the left. Maybe that's a function of how I straight put my heart rate strap on. Leg spring stiffness, again, it's quite interesting here because it's noticeably lower in the Adizero Pros than the other two. Maybe that just sort of shows that the other two shoes are more out and out racers, and the Adizero Pro is more of a training type shoe, which is kind of confusing because Adidas don't really market the Adizero Pro for any particular thing. They don't really say it's a race shoe. I think they're probably now trying to put the Adios Pro in as their marathon racing shoe. But they don't really say what the Adizero Pro is for. I think it's one of those shoes, a bit like the Brooks Hyperion 1, that they sort of rolled out, and you think, well, why did they bother? And then for interest here are the segment times. So these two here were going out, and then this is the same segment in the reverse directions, obviously a bit faster when I was going at half marathon pace to marathon pace. And the weather was sort of a nice weather for running, not too hot, not too cold, but a bit windy. So what do I make of this all in all? Well, I think if I was to choose between the METARACER and the Adizero Pro, then I would choose the METARACER because it's just slightly lighter, just feels slightly easier, although in this data there's not a huge amount in it. But I think the big takeaway is that when I put the next percent on very tired legs on the last one, I actually managed to get my heart rate down, ran as fast, if not faster than the other two. So, you know, if you're looking to say that the METARACER £180, the Adizero Pro £160, are they really value for money for an out-and-out racer? Well, I think I have to say, based on this evidence, no. I think if you want your out-and-out racer, you better stick with the high-stack shoes. I also found it quite telling. I thought my legs were a bit more beat up doing 8 miles in the two low-stack shoes than in the next percent. So I hope you found this interesting, and look forward to seeing the next one. Okay, bye.